Hello everyone. Today we're going to look at Europe and the winners and the losers. And this paragraph is all about the way certain countries in Europe have developed themselves during the last 3 or 4 decades. And with it in mind, we would look at the following objectives. First of all, I would like to look at which part of Europe is the most developed at this moment. The blue banana, what is that? Restructuring, deindustrialization, the change of the rural area in Germany, capital-intensive industries, and what agglomeration advantages. But first of all, we have to look at the way Europe did develop during the last, 40 years. If you look at European development, you might notice that the prosperity is higher in certain locations in the center of Europe. From the north of Italy through Switzerland, Germany, the Netherlands, Belgium and to London, there's an area which is actually highly developed. It contains a lot of inhabitants and the prosperity is here the highest. Next to that, there's a location on the west border of Norway which is rich as well. So these areas are at this point of time the most important economic zones in Europe. The further you go to the east or the south, the less prosperous the country is, of Europe is. So you see that the prosperity depends on the way that certain regions work together. And there's a name for this. If you look at the next slide, you see that it is called the blue banana. And this blue banana came up back in 1989, I think, by some French scientists who saw that the region from the north of Italy through Switzerland, Germany, through the Netherlands to London had a pretty high GDP. So the gross domestic product was higher here, and this is of course what I said on the last slide. You see that the prosperity is higher there. Well, if you look at the map on the left one, you see that the amount of people that lives there is higher as well. Nearly 100 million people are living in this blue banana. So that means that there must be enough people who can do work that we need in Europe to gain money. And that might explain the higher GDP as well. So the population density is visible on the map on the left. On the right, you see the differences between the regions, and you can see that in some points in this map, the regional GDP is 150% of the European Union mean. So that means that it is really a rich region, and this has everything to do with the way that it developed through the years. These regions, the blue banana, originally had intensive industry, and these areas were restructured during the last 30 years because they got into problems earlier. In the 1980s and 1990s, the areas with the heavy industry, like labor-intensive industry for creating of textile, clothing, shoes, the iron and steel factories and shipyards, all moved that production to low-income regions like the Eastern Europe countries, or even further away to China or other Asian countries. And because of that, there was less work in Europe, and they had to do something with these old industrial regions, old industrial buildings. And on the pictures on top, you see textile industries in the east of the Netherlands, which were closed earlier, and on the bottom you see the Zeche-Zollverein, which is a former mine in Germany, in Essen, and this was closed as well some years ago, and now it is changed into a location which you can visit. You can hire the buildings for discussions, you can swim on a pool, there's a Ferris wheel, all kind of things that, well, actually changed the look of that heavy industry area into something high-tech. And that deindustrialization started earlier than the 1980s. In 1965 already, some of the highest industrial parts, the most intensive parts of the industry, moved to cheaper countries. So when this process went on, it meant that the mines got to be closed. It was not possible anymore to mine there and obtain enough money. And the closure of the mines when they moved to low-income countries meant, of course, that the blast furnaces, the Hoochovens, had to be extinguished, and that the steelworks there had to close their gates. At this point in time, in the Netherlands, there's still one of these steelworks available, that is Tata Steel in IJmuiden, but the result was that there was an enormous high unemployment rate, and then the result was, of course, the deindustrialization of that area. But you might wonder, what can we do with the old mining areas? Yes, we could simply throw them away, but how can we use the old buildings nowadays? And that is deindustrialization as well as restructuring, actually. You can see that on this picture. The Ruhr area did change a lot. You can see that the factory still is there, but it is not used anymore. There's a swimming pool there, and there's a Ferris wheel somewhere else on the picture. I don't know if it's visible there. It was on the right. But of course, you can use it for other things as well. For the high-tech industry, which means that they don't have to use the coal, they don't have to use the factory industry anymore. Well, they can use all kind of things. Like computers, like technology, and that is what the Ruhr area did, because it forms a large market. It's very prosperous. It is easily accessible. Of course, when it was still a mining area and steel factory area, they had railroads, which they of course needed for the transport of the products that they made or they wanted to import. And nowadays you can use them for the transport of people. There are a lot of people who are well trained, and so there's an enormous labor force which can be used again. So what happened? The Ruhr area changed from a labor-intensive region, from an industrial area, into a service region, and that means that the high-tech industry became more important there. And high-tech industry is mostly footloose. So what does that mean? Well, if you're talking about a footloose industry, it's not connected to mineral resources. It does not need coal. It runs on electricity, and of course electricity is everywhere, so you can just plug in your laptop and start working, and that is what they did in this region. Well, then we go to the south of Germany. That is capital-intensive industry, and it does have agglomeration advantages. So what is that? Well, first of all, you have to look at what kind of companies will establish itself near the car industry in the south of Germany. There are some car brands in Germany which do have their production facilities in the south, and of course those production facilities need all kinds of parts for the fabrication of their cars. They're not making everything themselves. So they need a capital-intensive industry, and that are companies with a lot of capital which can be used in the production itself. So they do have investments for the production. Of course, the networks of supporting companies, these companies are needed because they deliver the parts that are needed to make the car into an end product which we can buy at the shop. You do have the financial and commercial services. So then you're looking at a supporting company that looks at the financials, at the commercial services, and the research, of course. And then you look at scientific institutes like a university and high-skilled people. So when you're looking at agglomeration advantages, all these companies are in each other's neighborhood and they can take advantage of each other. So that was it, and I hope that I gave you an idea of how Europe changed during the years that have passed. And you see that it changes and it will keep on changing. So in the future, these high-tech industry will be moved as well at some point in time. But what will happen next, we still don't know. But it's a continuous process. Keep in mind that that process will go on as long as we people will develop it ourselves.